I'm turning into something she'd once read about in her nightmare books. Those were the first words that escaped me when I realized the sickness had sunk its roots too deeply to be denied. I whispered them into the cracked mirror above the wash basin, watching the skin along my jaw ripple faintly, as if something beneath it shifted in lazy, rotting contentment. A soft green bruise pulsed under the surface, warm, like something growing, something blooming, something older than fear. And as I stared at my reflection at the man dissolving into a creature I didn't understand, I thought of her. I always think of her first. Mara, my daughter, my sunrise, my last tether to who I once was. She used to sit on my knee with her little storybook of Emperor's night terrors, tracing the pictures with tiny fingers as she giggled at beasts made of mold and teeth. She clung to my arm whenever a plague ghoul illustration appeared, and I'd laugh, telling her monsters could never hurt brave girls. Now the mirror shows me the truth. I am becoming one of them. But it didn't start with fear. It started with life, quiet, simple, honest life. Back then, I was just a factory man, another soul in the sweaty procession of laborers feeding the manufactories that painted our sky black. My hands smelled of oil and steel, my clothes always carried dust, and every evening, when the shift whistle shrieked across the district, Mara came bounding toward the gate with a grin so wide it burned away the fatigue in my bones. Her hugs smelled like old paper, and the soap she liked lavender, before all the flowers died. I can still feel that. I hope I can always feel that. "Daddy," she would say, tugging my sleeve, "tell me something good." And I always did. I told her the Emperor watched over us, that our world was safe, that sickness could never reach us. Lies, perhaps, but necessary ones. I thought they would protect her heart longer than truth ever could. I was wrong. The first signs were small, too small for the administratum to care. A farmer at the market selling carrots that collapsed into mush when bitten. A neighbor's cough that smelled faintly of honey. A rat swollen with tumors that burst when touched, releasing a cloud of shimmering spores that drifted like tiny lanterns in the light. We laughed then. Nervous laughter. The kind people use when their instinct screams but their mind refuses to follow. The priests told us it was a humbling trial. Decay said it was seasonal rot. The Arbites shot the first infected man and burned his house down. Everyone else pretended that meant control. But the rot didn't stop. It crept into the walls, the food, the water, into the dreams of children and the prayers of priests. It whispered to us on warm winds that should not have existed. It clung to our clothes like a lover who knew we would one day stop pulling away. Mara noticed before I did. "Daddy," she said one night, clutching her blanket close. "Why does the moon look sick?" I looked up through the cracked window. The moon wore a bruise, a faint green stain across its pale surface like mold blooming on old bread. I told her it was pollution. She nodded, pretending to believe me. The truth is, even then I felt something wrong in the air, a weight pressing against my lungs, a sweet smell coating my throat, a softness in the soil that felt less like earth and more like flesh. But the true beginning, the moment everything changed, was the morning I woke to find tiny footprints of wet rot blooming across our kitchen floor. Not mine, not hers, something else. I cleaned them before she woke. I told myself it was a leaking pipe, a spill, anything but what I feared. I held her close that day as we walked to the ration lines, her small hand gripping mine tightly. The city groaned around us with a sickness too slow to see yet too vast to escape. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath flesh not yet softened, beneath bones not yet hollowed, beneath a heartbeat that still belonged to a man, something warm and patient whispered, "You will understand soon, little one." I didn't know then that it was speaking to me. Mara always woke before I did, even on the mornings when the sky was a sheet of grey rot clouds, and the hum of the manufactorum engines sounded more like coughing than machinery. She would tug at my sleeve with that stubborn spark in her eyes. "Daddy, get up," she'd whisper. "You promised we'd go early today. Before the crowds, before the sickness, before the fear, before everything we knew began to soften and rot." I remember those quiet mornings far too clearly now, the kettle rumbling on our tiny stove, Mara sitting cross-legged on the counter, swinging her feet as she waited for the first steam to rise. She always arranged her storybooks beside her tales of brave soldiers and shining saints stacked neatly, in an order only she understood. I'd braid her hair while she talked about nothing and everything, her dreams, her drawings, the neighbor's cat, the girl in her class who always stole chalk. Normal things, human things. I cling to those moments the way dying men cling to breath. When the first real signs of sickness spread across our district, they didn't look like a plague. They looked like mild inconveniences, easily dismissed. The butcher's meat spoiled faster. The water tasted faintly sweet. The street lamps flickered with a strange green tint. Flies gathered around every gutter, whispering in their tiny wings. And the soil emperor helped me. The soil beneath the city softened. It wasn't mud, it wasn't water leakage. It felt like trampling on flesh, soft and warm beneath our boots. No one wanted to admit it. Everyone pretended the admin officials and their hollow reassurances meant something. Dehumidification malfunction, nothing to fear. But even children know when adults lie. Mara clung to my hand as we passed the ration lines, her face half hidden behind the toy stuffed bear she took everywhere. She inhaled shallowly through her nose, wincing. "Daddy, it smells funny again." I told her it was the factories. She nodded. She didn't believe me. Our neighbor, Mistress Halden, coughed violently on her balcony, clasping a cloth to her mouth. It came away stained with something thick and yellow. I looked away before Mara could see, but she did. She always did. The Arbites sealed Halden's door that afternoon. No explanation, no rites, no prayers, just a hollow clang of metal locks, and then the thunderous roar of a purging unit. By nightfall, flies swarmed her window in a churning halo. Mara cried into my chest. I held her. I told her she was safe. Another lie. Days turned into a slow descent. More neighbors vanished. Carts of waste disposal rolled through the streets, dripping. Priests marched from hab to hab, offering blessings with voices that cracked under unseen strain. The manufactorum issued new warnings. Do not touch any substance seeping from walls or grates. Report all sweet odors. Immediately avoid contact with flora of unknown origin. But rot doesn't obey warnings. Rot waits. Rot spreads. Rot loves. One night, while Mara slept curled in her blankets, I heard soft tapping at the door. Not fists, not boots. Something soft, something moist. Something dragging itself across the metal, like a child tracing its fingers down a cold railing. I didn't open it. The next morning, greenish streaks of slime clung to the threshold, glistening with tiny spores that drifted in the light like glowing dandelion fluff. I scrubbed them away before Mara woke. She emerged from her room with sleepy eyes, rubbing them with small fists. "Daddy, the air smells sweeter today." She smiled, thinking sweetness meant something good. I froze. "Don't breathe too deeply, Petal," I whispered. "Just stay close to me." She nodded, trusting me the way only a child can. But I could already feel it, deep in the gut, behind the lungs, in the marrow of the world. This wasn't normal. This wasn't natural. This wasn't stopping. Mara tugged my sleeve again. "Daddy, you'll keep me safe, right?" I looked down at her, at the innocence in her eyes, the hope in her voice. And I told her the last lie that ever left my lips while I was still fully human. "I'll protect you from everything." I didn't know then that one day, she would need protection from me. The day the sickness first touched our doorstep did not arrive with screams or monsters or daemons. It arrived quietly, softly, like a guest too polite to knock. I remember waking before Mara, the air in our hab unusually warm and heavy, clinging to my skin like a fever. Outside, the sky held a strange green pallor, as if someone had smeared rot across the clouds. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Pollution, weather, one of the manufactorum's endless malfunctions. But the truth waited for me in the street. The morning ration line had dissolved into chaos. People huddled in clusters instead of queues, whispering in hushed, frantic tones. Children were crying, not from hunger, but from fear. The air smelled wrong, sweet, damp, almost floral. I tasted rot in every breath. Mara stayed close beside me, her small hand gripping mine with unusual strength. "Daddy," she whispered, "it smells like old fruit." She wrinkled her nose. I forced a smile I didn't feel. "It's just the harvest season," I lied. We pushed through the crowd, and that's when I saw it, our first undeniable sign. A man sat slumped against the water pump, his chest heaving. His skin had taken on a strange, waxy softness, rippling faintly with each breath, like dough rising too quickly. Yellowish fluid leaked from his pores, trickling down his neck in glistening streaks, and on his cheek, small mushrooms sprouted like tiny, white blossoms. Mara gasped. "Daddy, he's growing." I pulled her against me before she could see more. Arbites stormed the area moments later, shoving civilians aside. They barked orders, but their voices shook. Two of them dragged the man away, leaving trails of slick rot on the pavement. A third turned to us, his rebreather hissing. "Return to your homes. Block quarantine begins now." Someone in the crowd shouted, "Is it the plague?" The Arbite shot them in the chest without hesitation. Mara screamed. I covered her eyes, pressing her face into my coat. We ran. When we reached our hab block, the entire building trembled with the distant thunder of purging units. A thick, unnatural fog rolled slowly between the structures, too heavy to be mist, too warm to be smoke. It smelled of rotten fruit and wet earth. I recognized the scent. Every father who works factory lines knows it. Decay. Inside, Mara clung to me, shaking. "Daddy, what's happening? How do you explain to a child that her world is starting to rot from the inside out?" "You're safe," I murmured, kneeling to hold her cheeks gently. "Nothing is going to hurt you." Another lie cast like a thin shield against a storm. We stayed locked inside as the hours crawled by. Outside, I heard things wet, dragging sounds, echoing gurgles, distant weeping. The fog thickened, our windows fogged with green condensation. The metal pipes along the walls sweated droplets of viscous slime. I checked Mara every few minutes, desperate for signs she was still healthy. She sat on the couch, hugging her stuffed bear, eyes wide, breathing lightly as if afraid the air itself might bite. When evening came, the building's power flickered. Lights stuttered. A low, rhythmic hum vibrated through the floor, slow, steady, like the heartbeat of something vast beneath us. Mara crawled into my lap. "Daddy, I don't like it here." "I know," I whispered. "But we'll make it through." I told myself the same thing. But then, as I carried her to bed and tucked her blankets around her small frame, she looked at me with those soft, innocent eyes and asked, "Daddy, are we going to turn rotten like them?" Her fear carved itself into my bones. "No," I said, brushing her hair from her face. "I promise." But as I bent to kiss her forehead, I felt it a faint warmth beneath my own skin, like something breathing inside me. The infection had already chosen its home, and though I didn't know it yet, the rot had begun to grow the moment I made that promise. The morning after the man with the mushrooms on his cheek was dragged from the ration line, our world shifted subtly at first, as if reality itself were pretending everything was fine. I woke to the sound of dripping. Not water, something thicker, heavier. A slow pat, 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 echoing from the kitchen. For a moment I lay in bed, Mara's small form curled against my chest, breathing softly. She always slept with her hand clutching my shirt, afraid, even before she understood why. My own breaths came ragged. The warmth beneath my skin had grown overnight. When I pressed a hand to my ribs, I swore I felt something pulsing back. Pat, pat, pat. I eased her off me and moved quietly toward the sound. The kitchen ceiling had developed 3 small blisters, fleshy bulges that throbbed faintly, dripping yellowish fluid into a pot on the stove. The smell was sweet, sickening, familiar now. Nurgle does not knock. His gifts seep in. I covered the blisters with a rag, forcing myself not to retch. When I turned, Mara stood in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, why does the house have bruises?" She said it so innocently I almost broke. "It's just old pipes." I lied again. She nodded, though fear flickered behind her eyes. Later, as we walked to the balcony for air, I realized the entire block had changed. Vines of mottled green crept along the walls like veins. The air tasted thick, sweet, heavy. Clouds of tiny spores drifted down the stairwell as though descending from a corrupted heaven. People whispered in the corridors, "It's the rot bloom." "No, it's a new famine mold. I heard it's chaos born. The Emperor will save us. The Emperor has abandoned us." I held Mara's hand tighter with each voice. By midday, the plague priests arrived, hoods stitched with sacred sigils, censers swinging, chanting hymns that didn't sound like the ones we grew up hearing. They insisted the sickness was a test of devotion, a cleansing trial. But their eyes were hollow, their coughs were wet, their skin sagged beneath their robes. One of them collapsed mid-prayer, and something crawled out of his mouth, a tiny, wriggling thing that looked like a maggot wrapped in thin threads of hair. The crowd screamed. The Arbite shot the priest through the skull and set fire to his body right there in the street. The smoke smelled sweet, too. Mara clung to me the entire time, burying her face in my coat. "Daddy, why is everyone dying?" I had no answer that could protect her heart. When we returned home, she asked for her storybook, the one with illustrations of monsters she once found thrilling. Pages of nightmares and creatures with too many mouths. She used to laugh at them, pointing at the drawings and saying, "Look, he's silly." But now she looked at the same creatures and trembled. "Daddy, the monsters in my book look like the people outside." My throat tightened. "They're just pictures, Petal. But what if they're becoming real?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I gathered her into my lap and held her, feeling her small heartbeat against my chest, steady, alive, pure. For a moment, the world felt distant, the rotting walls nothing but a far-off threat. But outside, someone screamed. A man shouted prayers until his voice dissolved into wet gargling. Something slithered across the hallway floor. The building groaned with another flesh blister forming beneath the paint. Mara pressed her hands to her ears. "Make it stop, Daddy." If I could have torn the rot out with my bare hands, I would have. Instead, I whispered, "You're safe with me." Her breathing slowed. She looked up at me with trust that felt like a knife twisting in my ribs. Because even then, even before the first fever, before the first bloom beneath my skin, before I tasted sweetness on my breath, I knew something was growing inside me. And I feared it would one day take her smile forever. The days blurred into each other like smudged ink, each one heavier than the last. The rot outside grew bolder, creeping along the walls like a patient beast learning how to walk. But inside our small apartment, I fought to keep a bubble of normalcy alive for her. Always for her. Every morning, I made Mara's favorite ration porridge, even though it tasted faintly sour from the tainted water. Every morning, she pretended it tasted the same as before. Every morning, we shared a moment of fragile quiet before the screams outside reminded us where we lived. One morning, I found her sitting by the window, her stuffed bear in her lap, staring at the street below with wide, frightened eyes. "Daddy," she whispered, "why are the people crawling?" I came to her side and saw them, 3 figures dragging themselves along the ground. Their movements were sluggish, limbs swollen to twice their size. Their skin rippled, pulsing in soft waves, as if maggots moved beneath it. One of them reached out with arms that had fused together into a single gelatinous limb. A wet sound escaped the creature, halfway between a sob and a laugh. Mara buried her face in my arm. "Daddy, make them stop." I pulled her away from the window. "Don't look, Petal, don't look." But the sound followed us, wet, dragging and soft, gurgling moans. I lifted her chin gently. "Let's read something. Anything you want." She nodded, clutching her storybook tightly. It was her anchor, her proof that the world once had color. We sat on the couch and turned to the page with the Emperor fighting a great beast made of pus and teeth. Mara's voice shook as she read the first line. The monster roared, but the Emperor stood tall and brave. Her voice broke. A tear slipped down her cheek. "Daddy, I don't want to read this one anymore." She closed the book, hugging it to her chest. I don't like monsters anymore. Her words pierced deeper than any infection. We tried drawing next. Mara always loved drawing the gardens in the administratum quarter tall trees, pink flowers, bright sun. But when she put charcoal to paper now, all she drew was spirals, thick, dark spirals. Tight, claustrophobic circles she couldn't stop filling. "It's what I see when I try to sleep," she whispered. I held her trembling hand until the charcoal snapped between her fingers. The city outside continued its slow collapse. The manufactorum chimneys no longer belched smoke, they coughed out clouds of spore dust that drifted like sickly snowflakes. The Arbites stopped patrolling. The priests stopped praying. Even the sky shifted, turning the bruised color of rotting fruit. And still, I tried to shield her. But her innocence was slipping faster than I could save it. That evening, as we ate our meager meal, Mara set down her spoon and looked up at me with eyes full of fear older than childhood. "Daddy," she whispered, "are we going to die?" I froze. Children should not ask that. Children should not know the shape of that question. "No," I said softly. "Not as long as I'm here." She watched me carefully, as if trying to see if I truly believed my own words. Her small hands curled into fists. "Promise?" she asked. I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "I promise." But as night deepened, and she slept, curled against me, the rot's warmth pulsed beneath my own skin. My breath tasted sweet, my vision flickered with green halos. And I realized something terrible. I wasn't sure how long I would be here, in the way she meant it. Not sure how long I would remain myself. Not sure how long I could keep the promise I had just made. The night everything changed was quieter than the others. No screams, no gunfire, no distant purges, just silence thick enough to choke on. Silence that felt wrong, as though the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to crawl out of the dark. Mara couldn't sleep. She tossed beneath her blankets, clutching her stuffed bear so tightly its seams threatened to tear. With every shift, I heard her inhale sharply, as if afraid her own breath might betray her. I sat beside her, stroking her hair, humming the lullaby her mother used to sing. A small comfort, though the tune felt hollow now, echoing strangely in the stale air. "Daddy," she whispered, "I had a bad dream again." I leaned closer. "Tell me." Her eyes glistened. I was running through the street, but the ground was soft, like skin. She took a shaky breath. "And you were calling me, but your voice sounded heavy." A shiver ran through me. "It was just a dream, Petal." "No," she said softly, "because when I woke up the house was breathing." I froze. "What do you mean?" She pointed to the corner of the room where the wallpaper bulged, slightly moving, rising and falling in a slow, subtle rhythm. I stepped closer, pressing my hand against it. Warm, elastic, alive. A faint tremor pulsed beneath my palm, like a heartbeat. I pulled my hand away quickly. "It's just the pipes," I lied again. She watched me with those soft, knowing eyes. She didn't believe me anymore. And I realized in that moment, her childhood was over. I carried her into the living area, away from the pulsing wall. The lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the floor. The smell of rot drifted faintly from the vents. Mara hugged her bear tightly, burying her face in it. "Daddy, I don't feel safe." I sat her on the couch and knelt in front of her. "I'm here. Nothing will hurt you." Her lip trembled. "But what if something hurts you?" My heart twisted. "I'm stronger than I look." She shook her head. "No. I saw your hand earlier." My breath caught. "What did you see?" "You were cleaning the kitchen," she whispered. "And your hand, it looked soft, like it was melting." I hid my shaking. "You must have imagined it." Her voice dropped to a fragile whisper. "Daddy, I don't think I imagined anything anymore." Before I could answer, a knock echoed from the apartment door. Soft at first, then again, louder, wet. Mara clung to my arm. "Don't open it." "I won't." But curiosity, fear, and responsibility tangled together as I approached the door. Each step felt like walking toward a grave I hadn't dug yet. I pressed my ear against the metal. Something breathed on the other side. Slow, wet, patient. "Daddy," Mara whispered urgently. "Step back." I did. Just as the thing on the other side slid something beneath the door, a scrap of cloth. I bent and lifted it carefully. It was stained with greenish streaks, smelling faintly of rot and flowers. A child's ribbon. Mara's ribbon. Her face went pale. "That's mine. But I didn't lose it." I swallowed hard, skin crawling. Someone or something had taken it, had touched her belongings, had stood at our door. The knock came again, 2 slow taps, almost gentle. "Daddy." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I pulled her behind me and backed away as the door flexed inward, as if something soft pushed against it. The entire surface rippled. Something whispered through the keyhole, a low, affectionate croak. "Little one." Mara squeaked in, terror burying her face in my back. I grabbed her, lifting her into my arms. "We're leaving. Now." The house groaned around us. The air tasted sweeter. The infection had found us, and it would not stop knocking. We fled our apartment before dawn, stepping into a world that no longer resembled our own. The air outside was heavy, so thick with spores it felt like wading through warm fog. Mara clung to my neck, her face buried in my shoulder, refusing to look at anything. I didn't blame her. The street beneath us pulsed faintly, like a living membrane stretched too thin. Ahead, the hab block groaned. A balcony sagged downward as its supports softened into sludge. The entire structure exhaled a long, wet sigh, as though relieved to be collapsing. Rot vines crawled up the walls, blooming with pale, fleshy bulbs that burst softly, releasing clouds of glittering spores. Mara whimpered, tightening her grip. "Daddy, where do we go?" "Somewhere safe," I whispered, though I had no idea where safe was anymore. There were no evacuation orders, no decay teams, no Arbeits. Only silence, punctuated by distant, gurgling noises echoing between half-melted buildings. I kept moving, stepping carefully to avoid patches of soft ground that wriggled underfoot. Every so often I saw something twitch in my peripheral vision, a tendril curling back into a vent, a mushroom folding its cap as if startled, a shadow breathing where no living thing should be. We reached the old tram tunnel. Once, it carried workers across the lower districts. Now it lay abandoned, the tracks warped, the carriages rusting in place like skeletons in a graveyard. It was the only shelter I could think of that still had some walls intact. Inside, the dark welcomed us with cool air free of spore drift. Mara loosened her grip slightly and peeked around. "It's better here," she whispered. "For now," I said, lowering her gently to the floor. We walked between the silent trams, my boots clicking against the metal. The tunnel lights flickered half-heartedly, giving us brief flashes of the space-rusted rails, peeling paint, a discarded ration kit, and then something else. On the wall beside the third tram, a smear of greenish-brown residue formed the shape of a handprint. But it was too large for a human hand. Too wide, too many fingers. Mara saw it too. She grabbed my sleeve. "Daddy, whose hand is that?" I swallowed hard. Nobody we're going to meet. We moved deeper until we found a carriage with its door jammed halfway open. I forced it wider, and the hinges screamed in protest. Inside, the seats were torn and covered in dust, but the air was dry, sterile, safe enough. I lifted Mara into the tram and sat beside her, listening to the faint hum of the city's dying systems in the distance. For a few minutes, it almost felt like we were alone in the world. Then she touched my hand. "Daddy, your skin feels different." I froze. Her small fingers traced the back of my hand, where the flesh had grown softer, slightly damp. The veins beneath it pulsed a sickly green. I pulled my hand away instinctively. Too fast, too frightened. She flinched. "Daddy, why did you move?" I forced a smile. "My hand's just cold." It was not cold. It was warm, too warm, like compost beginning to ferment. "I'm okay," I said, more to myself than to her. but she watched me with uneasy eyes, sensing what I refused to admit. An hour later, while she dozed lightly in my lap, I felt it again, that strange warmth blooming beneath my ribs. A slow swelling, like something unfolding inside me. When I pressed my palm to my chest, I swore I felt movement, as if something inside was stretching, growing, breathing. Then the whisper returned, soft, affectionate, childlike. "Do not be afraid, little seedling." I jolted upright, heart racing. Mara stirred, blinking groggily. "Daddy, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, wiping sweat from my brow. But when I looked down at my hand, a small patch of skin near my wrist had softened into pale, spongy tissue, like the first sign of decay on a fruit left too long in the sun. My stomach twisted. The plague wasn't just outside anymore. It was in me, growing, and it wanted her. I didn't tell Mara right away. How could I? How does a father look into his daughter's eyes and admit that something unclean is blooming inside him? That every breath he takes, every heartbeat echoing through his softening ribs, is one step closer to becoming the very thing she fears? No. I kept it hidden out of love, out of shame, out of a desperate hope that maybe the change would stop on its own. But decay does not stop. It waits, it settles, it smiles. By the second day in the tram tunnels, my body felt heavier, not with fatigue, but with growth. My joints ached, as if sprouting roots. The soft flesh at my wrist had spread into a faint webbing of greenish tissue, tender to the touch. Worse, Mara noticed every change with a child's frightening clarity. "Daddy, why are you breathing so loudly?" I hadn't realized I was. Each breath rattled wetly in my chest, as if my lungs were filling with something thick. I turned away from her, just tired, petal. She frowned but didn't argue. The tunnel, once a refuge, began to press in with each passing hour. Strange shapes twitched in the shadows between carriages, small, pale things that scurried too quickly to see clearly. Once, I heard something dragging itself along the wall outside, leaving a trail of slime that steamed faintly in the cold. Mara clung closer every time the noises passed. "Daddy, are there monsters in here?" I held her, though holding her hurt. My skin pulsed against hers, even she could feel it now. "We're the only ones here," I said softly. Another lie. Another failure. That night, as she slept curled against me, I felt a sudden sharp pain in my forearm. I lifted my sleeve to inspect it and found a cluster of tiny bumps beneath my skin, round, green, and pulsing softly like embryonic sacs. I pressed a finger to them. They twitched. Something inside them twitched back. A wave of nausea ripped through me. I clamped my hand over my mouth to smother a cry. Then, the whisper returned. "Shh. Do not fear, little one. Your garden grows beautifully." I nearly screamed. Instead, I squeezed my eyes shut and whispered a prayer under my breath, one of the old Imperial litanies, the ones the priests taught children to chase away nightmares. But the moment the words formed, the voice chuckled, warm, affectionate, delighted. "Pray if you wish. Even prayers can bloom." When Mara stirred beside me, I forced myself still. "Daddy?" she murmured groggily. "Yes, love? You're shaking." I swallowed the terror rising in my throat. "Just cold." She snuggled closer, small arms wrapping around me. Her warmth pressed against the soft rot forming underneath my skin. The contact made the infection react. I felt a strange ripple through my body, like hunger, like yearning. I pulled away quickly, too quickly. She froze. "Daddy, why won't you hug me?" Her voice trembled with hurt. My heart cracked. "I'm just not feeling well." She sat up, studying me with those sharp, innocent eyes. "Is it the sickness?" I hesitated too long. She saw the truth. Her lip quivered. "Daddy, are you getting sick like the others?" The words hit harder than any mutation ever could. I wiped a shaking hand over my face, smearing a faint trail of greenish sweat across my cheek. "I'm fine," I whispered unconvincingly. But Mara shook her head. "No, you're not. You smell different. And And your voice sounds like when I put my ear to the vents and hear the machines breathing. I felt my stomach twist into knots. She wasn't just scared. She was grieving me, grieving someone still alive. Before I could speak, a distant roar echoed through the tunnel, wet, heavy, and far too close. Mara grabbed my sleeve. "Daddy, something is coming." And for the first time since the infection began, I feared I wouldn't be able to protect her from the world, or from myself. The roar echoed a second time, closer now, thick and gurgling, like something dragging a river inside its lungs. Mara backed against the tram wall, clutching her stuffed bear so tightly its button eye popped loose and rolled across the floor. I stepped between her and the tunnel entrance on instinct, though every movement sent a throb of pressure through my softening muscles. "Daddy, is it inside with us?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't know, but because the truth would have broken what little hope she had left. A wet scraping sound slithered along the wall outside, followed by the soft patter of something walking with more limbs than a man should have. I could hear its breath, slow, wet, hungry. The tunnel lights flickered. Spores drifted from the far end like dust shaken from a rotten blanket. Mara covered her ears. "Make it go away." I reached gently for her, trying not to let her feel the heat pulsing beneath my skin. The infection responded to fear hers. Mine, it didn't matter. It fed off it. I could feel the sacs in my arm twitching eagerly. "Don't move," I mouthed silently. She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. Then the creature finally revealed itself. A distorted silhouette lurched around the corner, its body swollen into grotesque shapes, dripping strands of mucus that sizzled when they hit the ground. Its head hung sideways, half melted into its shoulder. Flies circled it in a buzzing halo. Where its arms should have been were swollen masses that pulsed like overripe fruit. It wasn't human anymore. But once, it had been. Mara whimpered. "Daddy, it's crying." She was right. As the creature dragged itself forward, I heard a wet sob escape what was left of its throat. A faint, broken sound like a plea. It reached one trembling, misshapen limb toward us, leaving streaks of green slime on the tunnel floor. And in that moment, I saw it. The thing wasn't hunting us, it was calling to me. The infection inside my chest pulsed with answering recognition like a heartbeat mirroring its own. A warmth spread through my ribs, soft and urging. I pressed a shaking hand against my sternum. "No, not now," I whispered. The creature shuddered, lifting its ruined head. Its eyes, one milky, one blackened, locked onto mine. It knew me. Or rather, it knew what I was becoming. Behind me, Mara tugged my coat in panic. "Daddy, stop looking at it." I forced myself away, but the creature surged closer, driven by some instinctual kinship. Each step came with a slurping noise. Its limbs bulged, and something inside them writhed like trapped snakes. Mara screamed. The sound snapped whatever hold the creature had over me. I grabbed her and ducked into the tram carriage, slamming the rusted door shut just as the thing collided with it. The metal groaned under the impact. A smear of rot oozed through the crack at the bottom. "Don't breathe it in." I covered Mara's face with my sleeve. She shook violently, pressing herself into my chest. Another impact. Another. The entire carriage trembled. Through the broken window, I saw the creature's swollen hands pounding at the metal, leaving streaks that hissed and bubbled. Every hit made the sacs in my arm twitch. The infection wanted out, it wanted him. I held the door shut with shaking arms until the pounding slowed. The creature slumped against the carriage, wheezing. Then it dragged itself away, leaving a slimy trail behind. Mara sobbed into my coat. I stroked her hair, though my hand trembled uncontrollably. "It's all right," I lied softly. "It's gone." But she pulled back and I looked up at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Daddy, your face." My blood ran cold. I touched my cheek. The skin there sagged soft, swollen, warm. A tiny fissure had formed near my jaw, weeping a thin stream of yellow fluid. Her breath caught. "You're getting sick," she whispered. Just like them. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't running. She wasn't angry. She was heartbroken. And that was worse than any plague. By the time the creature's echoes faded down the tunnel, my body felt like it was fighting itself. Every breath rattled through lungs that no longer obeyed me. Every heartbeat came with a soft, wet flutter, as though something inside had begun to rot into soup. Mara stayed pressed against the far corner of the tram carriage, her stuffed bear crushed to her chest, her eyes fixed on me with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. "Daddy, does it hurt?" she whispered. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to lie the way fathers are meant to lie to, protect their children from nightmares. But the truth was, it didn't hurt. Not anymore. The infection was past pain, past fever, past fear. It felt warm, comforting, like sinking into soft earth after a long, hard life. That terrified me more than anything. "I'm all right," I said, forcing a steady voice. "I'm just tired." Mara shook her head, tears bright in her eyes. "You don't look like you." I turned away before she could see the fresh swelling under my jaw, where skin had begun to sag like overripe fruit. The infection pulsed beneath it, steady, rhythmic, like a second heartbeat stitched into my flesh. Outside, distant screams tore through the tunnel, echoing along the walls. Civilians, maybe soldiers, being overtaken by the same thing, turning me inside out. The echoes grew closer, then faded again, swallowed by the soft, ever-present hum of decay. "We can't stay here," I whispered. Mara blinked. "Where will we go?" "Up," I said. "To the upper levels. Maybe the administratum still has shelters." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The administratum had abandoned us days ago. Only the plague remained. We stepped back onto the tracks carefully. Mara clung to my hand, but each time her fingers tightened, I felt my skin ripple beneath her touch. I forced myself not to pull away. I couldn't lose that connection, not yet. As we moved down the tunnel, an unsettling thought settled in my mind. The creature. It hadn't attacked Mara, only me. Was it? Calling to me? Recognizing me? Welcoming me? A soft voice curled through my thoughts, warm and sweet as rotting fruit. "You are never alone, my child." I staggered, gripping the tunnel wall. Mushrooms sprouted instantly from the damp imprint of my hand, blooming in seconds before collapsing into spores. Mara gasped. "Daddy, stop touching things." "I'm sorry," I whispered. We moved faster. At the tunnel's end, we climbed a rusted, maintenance ladder. Each rung trembled under my weight, the metal softening under my palms as the infection reacted. When we reached the upper access hatch, I shoved it open, and a wave of warm, sickly air washed over us. We emerged into a corridor I barely recognized. The walls bulged with pulsating sacs. The floor sagged like flesh. Mold crept along the ceiling in thick green spreads. A distant chanting echoed through the vents, wet, joyous, terrible. Mara pressed her face into my coat. "Daddy, I hate this place." "I know," I said, carrying her down the hall. "I do too." We turned a corner, and a man stumbled toward us. Or what was left of one. Half his face had melted into his chest, and his left arm dangled like boneless dough. He reached toward me blindly, moaning through a mouth full of thick green fluid. Mara screamed. I pushed her behind me, but something inside me responded to the creature, an ache, a pull, a yearning to join the chorus of wet, whispers filling the air. The sacs in my arm throbbed, my vision tinted green. The voice returned, gentle. "Family finds family." I clenched my fists, fighting it back. "No," I hissed under my breath. "Not yet." The creature lunged. I struck it with every ounce of strength I had left, an impact that splattered rot and sent it collapsing to the floor in a bubbling heap. Mara sobbed into her bear. When I turned to her, my breathing ragged, she whispered the words that broke me. "Daddy, you hurt him, like they do." I knelt, hands trembling. "I'm still me, Mara." She took a step back. Just one, small, but infinite. Her voice cracked. "Are you sure?" My heart, whatever was left of it, shattered. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure at all. We didn't stop moving after that. Every corridor felt like a throat, every room like a stomach waiting to digest us. The world was changing faster than I could understand, walls sagging, ceilings, sweating rot, spores drifting like cruel confetti. And through it all, Mara kept her distance just slightly, as if afraid that touching me would invite the sickness into her small, trembling bones. I felt that distance more than the rot chewing through my flesh. We reached the stairwell leading to the outer streets. The door had half melted off its hinges, sagging like skin draped over bone. I pushed it aside, and it peeled away with a wet rip, collapsing into a puddle at our feet. The outside world had become unrecognizable. Once, this district was filled with markets and small manufactories. Mara used to laugh at the street vendors trying to sell fake trinkets of saints. She used to chase birds through the courtyard. She used to smile. Now the sky hung low, green and heavy, swirling with clouds thick enough to touch. Buildings slouched under their own rotting weight. The cobblestones pulsed like cartilage. A broken fountain burbled thick yellow liquid that steamed in the air. Mara's breath hitched. "Daddy, the city's dying." "No," I whispered, voice breaking. "It's changing." She clutched her bear closer. "I don't want it to change." A scream tore through the air. I spun toward the sound, just in time to see a group of plague creatures dragging themselves from an alley, limbs fusing, bursting, reforming in grotesque shapes. Their bodies slouched like sacks of wet grain. One had a face split open like a flower, revealing pulsing green tissue where its mouth should have been. They weren't hunting food, they were spreading kinship. I grabbed Mara's hand and pulled her behind a collapsed vendor stall. "Don't look," I whispered, but she peeked anyway. "Daddy, why are they smiling?" Because they were. All their ruined faces were twisted into grotesque, blissful grins. I swallowed hard. "They don't feel pain anymore." "Do you?" she asked. The words froze me. My arm throbbed softly. The sacs beneath the skin contracted and expanded with each heartbeat, as if eager for release. My breath came in warm, sweet bursts that made my head light. "No," I said quietly. "Not really." Mara's eyes glistened. "Daddy, are you turning into one of them?" I couldn't lie. Not to her. Not anymore. "I'm trying not to," I whispered. Her lip trembled. "But you are." Before I could answer, one of the creatures turned toward our hiding place, its swollen head cocked sideways, sniffing the air. Then slowly, almost lovingly, it began dragging itself toward us, leaving a trail of quivering rot behind. I lifted Mara into my arms and ran, through twisting alleys, through collapsing archways, through streets where corpses sprouted flowers from empty sockets. My muscles burned, but not with exhaustion. With growth. The infection surged with every step, pulsing with a perverse joy. My lungs filled with thick heat. My vision smeared at the edges with green halos. Each breath felt like inhaling warm compost. "Daddy, stop," Mara cried. "You're scaring me." Her voice broke something inside me. I slowed, dropping to one knee, chest heaving. She stepped back instinctively, hugging her bear so tightly the stitching strained. "Daddy." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Your eyes." I touched my face. The flesh was hot, swollen. My vision swam in shades of sickly green. The infection pulsed beneath my fingertips, eager, hungry. "I'm still me," I whispered. Mara shook her head, tears streaming. You're changing right now." I reached toward her. She flinched away, and that small movement cut deeper than any mutation carving through my body. "Please," I begged, voice cracking. "Don't be afraid of me." "I'm trying," she sobbed, "but you're turning into something else." The wind carried spores around us like falling snow, and for the first time, I didn't know if she was wrong. By dusk, the plague wind blew through the streets like a warm, rotting breath. Every gust carried spores that shimmered in the dying light, drifting lazily, settling on everything: stone, flesh, memory. I tried to shield Mara with my body, but even that was becoming dangerous. Each time she brushed against me, the infection surged with an eager pulse, as though my sickness recognized her warmth and wanted to claim it. We reached the old Hab courtyard where she used to feed birds. Now the fountain in the center burbled with thick yellow sludge, bubbling softly, releasing a sweet, suffocating aroma. Shriveled feathers floated on the surface, what remained of the creatures she once chased laughing. "Daddy," Mara whispered. "I don't want to stay outside." Her voice cracked with exhaustion. She'd been crying quietly for hours. She didn't even hide it anymore. She was just a child trying to hold on to a father slipping away in front of her. "We'll find shelter," I said. "Somewhere clean," but there was no clean left. We ducked into a half-collapsed storefront, once a small bakery that smelled of warm bread. Now the counters sagged with mold, shelves bloomed green fuzz, and the floor pulsed beneath our boots. Mara winced, lifting her feet as though the ground might swallow her whole. The infection inside me throbbed warmly, comfortingly, almost invitingly. I clenched the edge of a shelf, ignoring the spores drifting from my own palms. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you okay?" "No," I finally admitted. "But I'm trying." That truth hung between us heavy, fragile. A distant crash echoed through the streets. Then another. The sound of something massive dragging itself closer. Mara's face went pale. "What is that?" "Something we can't fight," I whispered. She trembled violently. "Then what do we do?" There was only one answer left. We run. But when I tried to rise, my legs locked. A sharp, tearing sensation ripped through my calf as the flesh there softened further. I stumbled, gripping a table for support as mushrooms erupted from the cracks in my skin, tiny, pale, trembling. Mara screamed, backing against the wall. "Daddy, stop it. Make it stop." Her panic pierced through the infection's warmth, snapping me back into focus. "Mara, listen to me," I gasped. "Whatever happens, you run. Do you hear me? You run and don't look back." "No," she cried, shaking her head violently. "I'm not leaving you." "You must," I insisted. I can't protect you much longer." Tears streamed down her face. "You promised you'd keep me safe." "And I will," I whispered, "by keeping you away from me." Something massive scraped across the outside wall, rattling the entire shop. Mara screamed again as a grotesque shadow passed over the broken window board, lurching, dripping rot. The air tasted sweet, thick, almost syrupy. The infection in my chest pulsed in response, thrilled. I pressed a trembling hand to my ribs. "It's calling to me." "Daddy. Stop, please. Stop, please, don't say that." I swallowed hard. "Mara, look at me." She shook her head. "Please," I begged. Slowly, hesitantly, she lifted her eyes. "My sweet girl," I said softly, "I love you more than this sickness can ever take from me." For a moment, just a moment, I felt human again. Then the wall behind us buckled inward. A massive, swollen hand punched through the plaster, spraying rot and dust across the room. Mara shrieked. I grabbed her instinctively and felt my grip soften, my flesh yielding like warm dough. She tore herself free, backing away with pure terror in her eyes. "Daddy, your arm." I looked down. My forearm had split open, revealing soft green tissue beneath pulsing, eager, alive. Her face crumpled. "No, no, you're turning into it." "Mara," I whispered, choking. "Run." She shook her head. But the truth was, already in her tears, in her trembling hands, in her broken voice, "Daddy, you're not my daddy anymore." Her words shattered what little humanity I had left. And in that moment between love and decay, between fatherhood and monstrosity, I understood. She was already beginning to say goodbye. I don't remember how long I lay there after Mara's words broke me. Minutes. Hours. The sickness moves strangely through time, slow when I fear it, fast when I fight it. But when I finally lifted myself from the ruined floor of that bakery, my body felt different. Heavier. Softer. less mine. The world around me hummed with a sick warmth. The fountain outside gurgled like a throat swallowing endlessly. The buildings creaked as mold ate their bones. The sky sagged low, green and swollen like an infected wound. Everything breathed, everything lived, everything decayed. But Mara was gone. I knew because the infection in my chest felt quiet. Not satisfied, not victorious. Simply indifferent, as if her absence removed something it wanted, but not something it needed. I staggered into the street, calling her name despite the wet rattle in my throat. Mara. The sound came out wrong. Too low, too thick, too close to the gurgling moans of the plague creatures crawling through the alleys. I covered my mouth, horrified. Mara, please. Nothing answered, except the soft buzzing of flies circling overhead. I stumbled through the courtyard where she once chased birds, where she once laughed, where she once tugged my sleeve and begged me to buy her sweetcakes from the vendor. Now only the vendor's half-dissolved cart remained, flowers of mold blooming where bread once sat. Mara, I whispered again, almost prayer-like. I'm sorry. A shape lurched nearby, but it was only another victim. Its abdomen split open, weeping rot in steady drips. It gurgled as it crawled past me, paying me no mind. My infection pulsed faintly, and I felt a strange kinship toward it, a tether of decay binding our ruined bodies. I tore myself away from the feeling and pressed forward. Every corner of the district was empty of her, every shadow betrayed me. Every whisper of wind mocked me with sweet, sick fragrance. I reached our old hab block, though I barely recognized it. The entire frame sagged like softened wax. The windows had melted into translucent curtains of mucus. The walls breathed slowly, as though the building itself had learned to inhale. Still, I went inside. The door dissolved under my touch, sloughing into a puddle. The hallway beyond rippled like living carpet. I climbed the stairs, each step softer than the last, until I reached our apartment, or what remained of it. Her drawings still hung on the wall, though they dripped ink like tears. Her stuffed animals lay scattered on the floor, fur sprouting mold. Her storybooks sagged on the shelf, pages warped and blooming. And there, on her bed, sat her little stuffed, bear half-rotted, missing an eye. I picked it up. The infection surged with joy at the contact, as though recognizing the memory held in the toy's fabric. My grip loosened involuntarily. The bear sagged in my softening palm. I'm sorry, I whispered into the empty room. I wasn't strong enough. If she had died, the infection would have shown me joyfully. If she had turned, I would have felt her bloom through the rot's whispers, but there was nothing. She was alive, somewhere beyond my reach, somewhere beyond the plague's grasp, for now. That should have given me hope. It didn't. My legs buckled, and I sank to the floor, clutching the decaying bear to my chest. My tears mixed with rot, dripping onto the boards that pulsed faintly beneath me. I'm still your father, I whispered into the dark. I'm still me. But even as I said it, my voice gurgled with thick sweetness. My breath fogged the air with spores. My skin sagged, splitting faintly along my ribs. I wasn't sure if the words reached anything human inside me. I wasn't sure if anything human remained at all. I don't know when I stopped searching and started wandering. Maybe it was when my legs began to soften, each step leaving faint impressions in the pulsing ground. Maybe it was when the rot finally reached my lungs and every breath came out warm, sweet, thick. Or maybe it was when I realized the truth I had been running from. I could no longer follow her. I could only haunt the places where her memory lived. The streets I once walked as a man had become a mausoleum of what used to be. Walls sagged like wet parchment. Windows blinked open and shut, weeping mucus. Debris shivered under my feet as if alive. Every corner exhaled the warm breath of a plague-ridden world, and in that breath I heard whispers, gentle, affectionate, persistent. Little one, why do you resist? I pressed both hands to my ears, but the voice echoed from inside me, vibrating, through the rot crawling beneath my skin. Stop, I whispered to no one. Just stop. But decay has patience. It only grew quieter, warmer, more inviting. I stumbled back toward the tram tunnels where we first hid, where I first felt myself slipping. They were empty now, except for the soft glow of fungus growing in thick patches along the rails. Spores drifted lazily through the air like glowing dust. They swirled around me as if greeting a sibling. Something deep in my chest warmed at the sight. I recoiled, disgusted by my own reaction. "No," I muttered, slamming a fist against the wall. The metal dented easily under my touch, leaving a crater that pulsed faintly. I'm not. Not what?" The voice was amused. "Not ours? Not hers? Not dying? Tell us, little one." I slid down the walls slowly, my legs trembling. When I hit the floor, a puff of spores burst around me. They clung to my skin like soft, affectionate hands. I tried to crawl away. My body didn't listen. My arms were too soft, muscles melting into pulp, bones turning pliable. My fingers left streaks of greenish residue wherever they touched. The infection was accelerating now, claiming me with finality. But I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of forgetting her. I forced my trembling mind to remember her laugh, the way she scrunched her nose when something smelled strange, the way she traced the scars on my hands and asked where they came from, the way she hugged me so tightly every evening my ribs ached. But when I tried to picture her face, it blurred. "No, please," I begged, clutching my head. "Not her. Don't take her from me." The infection pulsed warmly, almost lovingly. Memories fade, so new blossoms may grow. "No." The word tore from my throat in a wet, gurgling howl. My voice no longer sounded human. I dragged myself toward the old maintenance bench where she once sat beside me, swinging her legs while asking endless questions about the trams. Each memory hit me like a hammer, sharp, painful, dissolving even as I reached for it. Her face flickered behind my eyes, then softened, then faded again. "Please," I whispered, forehead pressed to the trembling floor. Not her smile, not her voice. "Take me, but not her." The rot did not argue. It didn't need to. My mind was slipping. Bits of my humanity were peeling away like old paint, drifting into the warm, waiting dark. I curled into myself, sobbing thick, sticky tears that dripped down my cheeks like melted wax. "I'm her father," I whispered. "I'm her father." A pause, a rare silence in the plague's chorus, then soft, almost gentle, "Were." The word broke the last piece of me. My tears fell faster. My breath came out in sticky gurgles. My vision blurred until the tunnel lights became halos of sickly green. And in that collapsing moment, as my body surrendered to rot and my mind spiraled into warm decay, I realized I was dying. But worse than death, I was forgetting her. The end didn't come with violence or screaming. It came quietly, like a curtain lowering at the end of a tragedy no audience survived to see. I lay there in the dim glow of fungal light, feeling my body melt, soften, reshape itself into something unrecognizable. My skin sloughed off in slow ribbons, my bones bowed and creaked. My heartbeat thinned into a soft, wet flutter, more echo than pulse. But through all of it, I clung to a single thought, a single trembling fragment of humanity. Mara. Her name was the only thing that still tasted human on my rotting tongue. I forced myself upright, using the wall for support. My fingers sank into the softened metal, leaving deep impressions that slowly pulsed as though breathing. I didn't care. I needed to reach the place where she last saw me, as if stepping back into that moment could anchor my mind before it dissolved entirely. The district was silent, now. Not peaceful, never peaceful, but expectant. Every building trembled faintly. Every alley hummed with life. Every breeze carried spores that glowed like dying stars. The world wasn't dying. It was blooming. The plague didn't feel like an invader anymore. It felt like a tide, washing away the rigid lines of human suffering and reshaping everything into softness, warmth, inevitability. Part of me, an ever-growing part, wanted to lie down and let it take me fully. But another part, the last shard of who I once was, pushed me forward. I reached the collapsed bakery where I last held her. The doorway sagged open like a mouth breathing shallowly. I stepped inside, leaving a smear of soft rot on the frame. Her footprints were still there, tiny, frantic prints in the dusty floor. She had run from me, run from the thing I was becoming. The infection warmed at the memory, pleased by her fear. I pressed a fist to my chest, forcing a breath through lungs that gurgled. No, not hers. You can't have that. But the voice inside me sighed, patient and indulgent. Little one, everything returns to the garden, even memory. I shook my head until flakes of peeling skin drifted to the ground. Not her, not her. My voice cracked, thick with rot. I sank to my knees in the middle of the room. My flesh pooled slightly beneath me, spreading like warm wax under a lamp. Tears, if they could still be called tears, slid down my cheeks in viscous trails. I pressed my palms to the floor, feeling it pulse against me like a living heartbeat. I tried to picture her face, the curve of her smile, the brightness in her eyes, the way she laughed at my clumsy jokes, the way she traced the scars on my hands, the way she said "Daddy" like it was the safest word in the universe. But the infection was patient, and hunger is cruel. Each memory flickered, each detail softened, each piece of her dissolved like old paper in water. "No," I whispered, desperate, shaking. "Please, please, let me keep her." The voice inside me responded not with cruelty, but with unbearable kindness. "Even love decays, little seedling. Let it rest." Something inside me snapped, not bone, not flesh, but something deeper. The last thread that tied me to the man I was. I pressed my forehead to the floor and let out a sound I didn't know. I could make a sound halfway between a sob and a growl, thick and broken. "I'm sorry, Mara. I'm sorry." Her name felt foreign now. Too sharp, too bright, too human. My tears dripped onto her discarded stuffed bear beside me. It sagged instantly, the fabric dissolving into soft threads. As it melted, so did the final clear image of her face. And in the quiet warmth of my decay, surrounded by the soft cradle of rot, the last thought that flickered through my dissolving mind was this: I had loved her more than my life, more than my fear, more than the decay consuming me. And I had failed her. My body slumped forward, sinking into the soft, pulsing ground. The world embraced me. The rot welcomed me. My name faded. Her face vanished. But one truth remained, a whisper, rising from the last human ember inside my collapsing chest. I became rot, but the last beat of my heart was her name.